The sun is setting at the river's end. This is the place where you can find me when I need a solitary moment. With each memory lost in reverie, the shadows lengthen at the river's end. I'm sad and blue, but I remember when my heart was always full of laughter. How happy we were then at the river's end.
Hey gang, we are in Houston, Texas. We're at the historic Glenwood Cemetery. Doesn't get better than this. Very impressed. We are going to walk to the family plot grave of Howard Hughes, the eccentric. Movie made about him. Many of you know. Talk about his story. And we are going to see some just very intriguing monuments and gravestones on the way, like that. It is a very large place here. Now the office, if you look right over there, is a historic building. I was just in there, and the manager is named Richard Ambrose. And Richard is a gracious guy, very understated. It's funny, I went in and I asked permission. I said, can I do a video? And he just was listening to everything I was saying. I'm like, oh boy, this isn't gonna work. And then when I said, you know, I do things very respectfully, and he's just looking at me, and then all of a sudden he goes, have at it. And I was like, what? And he said, have at it. And I was like, thank you, sir. What a great guy. So we are going to have at it as we walk among all of these plots and statues and things. So let's talk about the life of Howard Hughes. What an interesting guy. And me as an aviator, I've always been intrigued with his story since a young age. Now, Robard Hughes Jr. was born December 24th, Christmas Eve, 1905. Father, Howard Sr., mother, Aline. Now, his dad was, well, I don't want to say a failure, but when they were starting out, he wasn't really doing so well. And then he ended up in Texas here, and he happened to be at the right place at the right time when an oil well sprung up like a gusher, and he quickly bought all the land, cheap. And literally days later, he sold it for like 100 times its value. Metaphorically, he had a small fortune. So he opened up a tool company, got into the oil business, snap, just like that. He ended up taking that and double downing on it, if you will, by inventing, I mean, he was doing his own drilling, and he was just not satisfied with the equipment, how cumbersome and inefficient it was, so he decided he would invent his own drill bit, and you still see it used today. It was called the two-cone roller bit, and it allowed for drilling in previously inaccessible places. So Senior made a lot of money, but he was very shrewd, and instead of selling them, he leased them. And he was doing well. Now, our Howard Hughes Jr., started out at a very young age having that same engineering aptitude. I mean, he was 11 years old and he built a wireless radio transmitter. That's pretty remarkable. At age 12, he was in the local newspaper for being the first boy here in Houston to have a motorized bicycle, but not just a motorized bicycle, but one motorized by a steam engine. He was strong in mathematics, flying, and mechanics. He took his first flying lesson. He was out and he saw a airplane. He was 14 years old in 1921. He attended the Fessenden School, a school for the intellectually gifted, which was in Massachusetts. Shortly after that, after his mother became sick and died, Howard Hughes Sr., right after that, died of a heart attack. Just 2 years later, in 1924, and all of a sudden, Howard was alone. He was 18 years old. The will had not been updated, so Howard Jr. got most of the money, the family fortune. On his 19th birthday, Howard Hughes was declared an emancipated minor, enabling him to do whatever he wanted, like golf. And he was pretty good. He shot par. He was playing with the biggest golfers of the age. He was playing with people like Gene Sarazen. And he was attending Rice University at the time of his father's death, and he ended up withdrawing, getting out of there. He had met someone special at college. It was June 1st, 1925. He married Ella Botts Rice, daughter from the family whom Rice University was named. Moved to LA, and they moved into the Ambassador Hotel there. And that's where Howard really learned to fly. And he would do a lot of other things. He would do movies, diversify the company. I mean, he was just like, he made this movie called Hell's Angels. He had no experience. I mean, he had made a movie, I think it was Swell Hogan's or Hogan's something, and he made the Hell's Angel movie, which is very famous. And interesting story about Hell's Angels, like he was a director, he was a producer, like he did it all. Everyone was like, yeah, right. And they're shooting flying scenes. The thing that stands out to me is when they were shooting the flying scenes, he was so picky, and this is how he was his whole life. He was compulsive. Details, had to get them right. That he like scrapped most of the footage because it didn't have, the clouds weren't right. And in California, they didn't, a lot of the summer there were no clouds. So, I mean, that's what I remember about the movie the most. And he was doing really well. Is that Michael the Archangel? Look at that. That is spectacular. That is made of bronze. Oh, he is stepping on Satan. And there's a chain. He's holding the chain around Satan's neck. There's 2 shot glasses there. I wonder why they have that. Cradle graves up ahead. Well, there's so many dynamics and parts of his life. I could sit here for 4 to 5 hours and try to make an episode, but I'm going to focus on aviation, movies, and romances. Now, like I said, we'll start with aviation, one of my favorite subjects. He founded an aviation and aerospace company. He founded an aircraft company. And it was then he started beginning to show his oddball side. Shortly after founding the company, he did this stunt with American Airlines. He changed his name And he like went behind the scenes and he just got a uniform and became a baggage handler. And like, that's what he did. And I don't know if he wanted people to talk about him when they found out or what the story was, but like he did that until they like figured out who he was. Just strange. During and after World War II, he turned the company, his aviation company, into a defense contractor. Of course, all the companies were doing that, like Ford, etc. And Hughes Aircraft became a major company manufacturing numerous technology-related products, and still, you know, for decades. Now, one interesting story is the Hughes H-4 Hercules, which they nicknamed the Spruce Goose. You probably heard of the Spruce Goose. It was the, wow. I'm sorry, I have to time out again. This looks like another Michael, but this one is spooky. Just have to digress here just for a minute, folks. And again, I don't plan these walks, but look at that. I mean, that is I see with the sword, this has got to be with the angel, Michael the Archangel, right? Wow. That is spectacular. So talking about the Spruce Goose, largest aircraft, largest seaplane made at the time. The Germans were just devastating shipping with the U-boats, we all know that. And the idea was to ship cargo and troops across the ocean instead of the converted ocean liners and troop carriers and things. So he built this monstrosity. There was no aluminum, and he had to use wood. It wasn't spruce wood, it was birch. So he built this monstrous plane. I mean, it was ridiculous. If you've seen pictures of it, it has 4 engines on each side. Literally, the thing that stands out, I haven't gone and seen it yet, but it's still preserved, is each engine has like an engineer compartment. The engineer never really, it did fly, but never really flew. We'll talk about that. But while it's running, each engine had an engineer sitting there the whole time. And Howard Hughes, he would have to fly and be the test pilot for everything. His ego, he wouldn't let anyone else do it. Now, if you see the cockpit, it's like a small office. It's a riot. And just imagine, you are sitting there pulling some levers that's controlling this beast. Well, the Spruce Goose, the Army or the federal government was getting mad because it was taking so long, and with his fastidious and details and compulsive disorder was delaying the whole schedule. And the government was getting mad, and they were accusing him of profiteering. And there is they called him down on the floor. And there is a famous, the TV cameras were there. And he's like, I poured my heart and soul in this thing, and da 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 da. He made them, did really good. He did really good in front of those cameras. He was mad. So he ended up taking the Spruce Goose out because they're like, this thing doesn't even fly. What are we paying for here? And what he does is he takes the ship out into the bay there, and they get it running just to show. And he wasn't supposed to fly it. He was not supposed to fly it. So they get it up on what's called the step. And that's in a seaplane, you got to plow up with the nose up until you get speed. And then you can level out and you get on what's called the step. And it's like, a boat. but he just couldn't resist, and he pulled back and he brought it up into what's called ground effect. And he was, I don't know, 10 or 20 feet up, and he was flying along. He never like went and flew. Didn't have the nerve, but he officially flew it, and that's what he was after. He wasn't. Everybody was shocked, even the guys on the plane. Nobody knew. The engineer, all the people on the plane. So he would do that, and he was a risk taker. He sat there with his beautiful whiskey-colored fedora, his hat, and just smile. Now, he would be involved in a number of plane crashes, and he would survive them all. He was extremely lucky, where others surrounding him did not. He would go on many adventurous flights. He piloted around the world. That was a big achievement that he made. He built this airplane called the P-38. Well, it's like the P-38 Lightning. It was called the Hughes XF-11, and it was to set speed records. It was for the, for the war. 450 miles per hour, service ceiling 44,000 feet, range 5,000 miles, which for those days, that was a lot. This new concept had these double propellers that were sandwiched together. That was kind of the bleeding edge technology at the time. And he's out on a test flight, and he's flying along, and everything's great. Everything is just great. And then all of a sudden, one of the props reversed pitch out of nowhere, and he was just going down. He was trying to make the country club, land on a fairway, didn't make it, clipped a couple of the corner, a couple of houses, took them out. Just imagine the speed he was landing, and he survives. I mean, he got pretty well injured on that. He received a lot of criticism, but heck. So that with the movies, he actually was considered a success. Now, let's talk about the romances. Let's talk about Howard Hughes, the ladies' man. And I would say he was the serial player, as we call it today. He dated all the movie stars. He was like one after another. And we're talking about some big names. We're talking about Bette Davis. We're talking about Joan Crawford. We're talking about Yvonne de Carlo from the Munsters, remember? Well, that was before the Munsters. Olivia de Havilland, Ava Gardner, Katharine Hepburn, Ginger Rogers, Janet Leigh, Joan Fontaine. I mean, that is all a list like no other. He also dated an actress named Hedy Lamarr. Hedy Lamarr is my favorite actress from back in those days because she had a noggin. She was beautiful, but she was intriguing, her accent and everything. But did you know that she actually invented technology that we use today? One of the things she invented was a radio hopping frequency for torpedoes, because a radio-guided torpedo would be jammed by the enemy. She invented technology that is used today that affects the internet and Wi-Fi. It's crazy, but of course, with that hopping radio, the Navy, the old men, they're like, they wouldn't hear of it, right? Where have we've heard that story before? Hedy Lamarr. Imagine her going in front of the pompous old men. What are you, a movie star? Are you kidding me? A radio hopping frequency? What are you talking about? I want to do her grave, but she just has a cenotaph in Vienna. If anybody knows, are her ashes scattered or is she buried somewhere? I'd love to know. I want to do her story someday. but I don't do cenotaphs. Let's walk over this way. There's really some, look at this. And again, I'm not scouting this out. I just pick a spot and see what I see as I tell you guys the story. But I see over here what looks like a big lion. Interesting. So if we skip ahead to his final years, I mean, that's where people get really intrigued with this story. Would end up turning into that crazy recluse, right? I mean, he was always eccentric, but in later years he would suffer more and more severe OCD, obsessive-compulsive disorder, you know, washing the hands, phobia for germs. In 1957, he told his aides that he wanted to screen some movies at a film studio near his home, and they stayed in the studio's darkened screening room. But the problem was he didn't come out. He didn't come out for 4 months. He just sat in there and ate chocolate bars and chicken, drank milk, and he was surrounded by dozens of boxes of Kleenex that he continuously stacked and rearranged. And it reminds me of, and I don't know if, I think it was The Twilight Zone, but you know, you always have that picture of the old actress who just can't forget what she was or what he was, and they sit in that darkened room. Maybe that's where Rod Serling got the story of Howard Hughes, or I'm not sure, because that's right around the same time. We'll have to check that, but it just reminds me of that person sitting in the dark there watching the good old days, how it was, who they were. So he sat fixated in a chair and looking, and he was naked. He would just watch the movies naked. He'd put a pink napkin on his crotch, and then he put all his urine in bottles. He would save his urine. So he was just, his mind was coming apart, and his aides were trying to get him committed. You know, in those days, anybody could get anybody committed. Let's take a look at this. He ended up getting married just so he didn't get committed. It was kind of a farce wedding. Yeah, that's his sleeping. Let's take just a moment here. Lester Harold Smith, who is he? Anybody know? I just want to see this lion face before we move on. In beautiful 4K, guys. Quite an edifice. I feel like we're at the Greek gods here, right? Got the Greek revival all over the place. Where is Zeus? Where is Zeus when you need him? All right, let's get back on our track here. We're right near his Howard Hughes. So let's walk over there. There was a movie that he made called The Conqueror. I did an episode in Georgia about Susan Hayward. She was there, John Wayne and others. Agnes Moorehead. They think that's what killed Agnes Moorehead, died early cancer, John Wayne, and a whole bunch of people that were there because it was on a nuclear testing site in the flats from before. So a lot of those people got cancer. They got cancer from that. Agnes from Bewitched, remember her? Yeah, she was a victim. Well, in the end, from his injuries, he was taking a mix of 3 drugs. I think it was codeine and a couple of other drugs that was a cocktail that he would just stay on the rest of his life. Addiction. He was practically unrecognizable in his final days. He had his hair long, beard, fingernails, toenails were long. He, you know, the 6'4" guy. He was tall. He only weighed about 90 pounds. Can you imagine? He died on April 5th, 1976. It was 1:27 p.m. He was en route from Mexico to the Methodist Hospital here in Houston. He was on this private jet and never made it. He never made it. Died on the plane. All right, so here is the, not that, but right beyond that is the Howard Hughes. I don't know if it's a family plot or just for him. Now they're doing a whole bunch of construction here at the cemetery. The front is closed down. They're putting a really cool new building, an entry, spending a lot of money. Now, I haven't walked here yet. I spied this from a distance. I was talking to the security guard who's up on the hill there. Yeah, I didn't see him. I was going to put him on camera. Cecil, good guy. He said, yeah, it's right down there, right at the bottom of the hill at the Iron Gate. So let's walk in and take a look. Yeah, Howard Robard Hughes. There's the inscriptions. Look at that. Oh, 1869 to 1924. That would be Mom and Dad. And here's Junior. Okay, here's Howard Hughes. Yeah, December 24th, 1905. April 5th, 1976. I think that's an inlay of, yeah, that's like brass, bronze. And I wonder what that used to be. Or that, or these. They have heavy security, so I don't think it's something that was stolen. But if you look here, you'll see these torches, these, not sure what they are. There's 6 of them. I don't know if there's significance for that. What do you guys think? There's a bed over here, like a, I wonder if somebody's buried in here. I'm sure Find a Grave. I didn't look at Find a Grave to see. I just like doing this stuff and just taking you guys along. It says ASC. I like finding out when I get there, and it's kind of like we're exploring together. You know, I think these just might be flower beds. There's one on each side. Yeah, so this is dug out into the hill, and I'm guessing that, if I were to guess, I'm going to say that the layout here, of course the cemetery would know, is you have Dad, you have Mom, and then Howard, all kind of like spokes in a wheel, right? And of course there's a spot on the left that's open. So I'm going to bet they're like right down here. Yep. There it is. Grave of Howard Hughes. Been wanting to come here for a long time. Well, the gate was left open. We're working on this. I'm just going to leave it as I found it. Alright, gang. Well, that's it. That is it for this story. And I've got another story I'm going to do here. Or maybe you've seen it already. I'm not sure the order. But anyway, let's keep the trip going. And that's Howard Hughes. Rest in peace to the Hugheses.
Lost in reverie, the shadows lengthen at the